Let me just set my, okay. So imagine, if you will, you're on a plane. So you get yourself all buckled in. You've got your 2 or 3 or 4 masks and your headphones, etc. And before you have to turn your phone off or onto airplane mode, you start flipping through your Facebook news feed. Okay, for those of you who are still on Facebook, and guy sitting next to you, total random guy sitting next to you, says to you, "You want me to show you? I can show you some tricks on that, some tips." And you're like, "No, thank you." And the guy persists. He's like, "No, really, I could show you some tips on Facebook." You're like, "No, I'm good." Okay, like, it's kind of rando axe murderer psychopath. You're gonna hand your phone to a stranger on a plane. You're not gonna hand your phone to practically anybody. You're not gonna hand your phone to your best friend, right? It's your phone, okay? But as you're saying no, you turn and you get a better look at the person next to you. You say, "What's your name?" And the guy smiles. He says, "Listen, don't ask me the story, but you got me, okay? I'm Mark Zuckerberg. Okay, it's a long story why I'm flying commercial and why I'm in coach, okay? But I'm Mark Zuckerberg, right?" And you're like, and you're looking and you're like, "Holy cannoli, it's Mark Zuckerberg," okay? So you're gonna be taking your phone like, "Dude, show me the tips." You're gonna be taking selfies like, "Mark Zuckerberg is showing me tips on Facebook," right? It's gonna be the coolest thing ever. You're gonna get off the plane and you're gonna literally tell every single person in your contacts what just happened, okay? Why? Because Mark Zuckerberg, who invented Facebook, just gave you tips on how to use it. Like, what could be cooler than that, right? So if you think about it, we believe that not only is there a God, but that God wrote the Torah, and that the Torah is this guidebook. God, who created us, he hardwired us, he softwired us, he knows exactly what makes us tick. He's like, if you want to know, you want some tips, you want some life hacks, you want to know how best to lead a rewarding, fulfilling, happy life long-term. I'm not talking about the most pleasurable thing to do right this second, okay? Snort that line of cocaine or engage in this particular behavior. But long-term, deep, meaningful happiness, here's the guidebook, okay? Now, what happens often is that as we begin our Jewish journeys, for those of us who don't know that much of a background, we get very caught up, as we should be, in the rituals, because it's all new. Sabbath, wait, teach me how does that exact work? And I want to keep kosher, but there's so many different laws of milk and meat in the kosher kitchen. And you're very wrapped up in these rituals. And so we often lose sight of certain other laws. And it's very interesting. There's this one fellow who towers over the entire Torah. We're about to get to him. Once a week, each week we read a different portion of the Torah. And so in the first of the 5 books, he doesn't appear at all. But starting not this week, but next week, he's born. Baby Moses is born, and he takes over. In fact, he so takes over that another word for the Torah, another phrase for the Torah, is the 5 books of Moses. Okay, that's how much that's how big a shadow he casts over them. Yet, interestingly, sometimes in the Torah he's mentioned first when it's listing him and his brother, Moses and Aaron, and sometimes his brother's listed first, Aaron and Moses, his older brother. So Rashi, the greatest of the biblical commentators, says, you know why that is? Because they're equal. Okay. So what's going on with 2021? Like, everybody passes, everybody gets an A. We don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. We don't want to hurt Aaron's feelings. Of course, we know Moshe's really better, but let's just say they're both equal, right? Like, what's going on? So the classic explanation of this is that what Rashi means is that they both reached their potential. Okay, Moses' potential was higher than Aaron's, but since they both hit their potential, so they're equal. But I heard a different explanation once as follows. Rashi means exactly what he says, okay? So if I say to you, who's the best basketball player ever, we could have a whole debate. You ask my dad, he's like, he'll go crazy. It's Wilt Chamberlain. Don't talk to me about anybody else. You ask me, it was Jordan. I might ask one of you might say LeBron, we could debate. But if I say who was the greatest scorer, you're down 1 point. You got 12 seconds left. Come on, you're taking Jordan. There's nothing to talk about. So it's true. Moses was the greatest ever. We even say that in the prayers. There never came another person like Moses. God himself tells Aaron and Miriam, no one's like him. I speak to him face to face. So he's number one. But he's number one between God and man. No one ever had a close relationship with God. But if you look between man and man, interpersonal rules, Aaron's number one. He was a guy that was always trying to make peace between 2 people that were fighting. So what Rashi's telling us is, guess what? Yes, Moses is the greatest ever with respect to man and God, but man and man, it's Aaron, so they're equal. He's reminding us that the interpersonal rules in the Torah are just as important as the rituals. And sometimes we lose sight of that. So I wanted to talk about were some of those interpersonal rules. So I curated a list. I have 3 do's and 3 don't do's. I'm a lawyer, so I may have cheated a little bit. I may have like a 1A and a 1B. So maybe it's 3 and 4. Hopefully you'll let me get away with that. I want to go through them, try to talk about them and tease out some lessons. So the first one on my list of do's is savor panim yafos. The sages tell us that you have to greet everyone with a cheerful countenance. Everyone. You don't realize often just how many people we pass during the day. You park your car. The guy gives you the ticket, the parking lot attendant. Thank you so much. You pick up your car at the end of the day. It could be a different parking lot attendant. Thank you so much. The waiter, the waitress, the guy who pours the water in the when you sit down at the restaurant. The person who hangs up your coat. If you're at work, the doorman. If you're in a dorm, the security guard. Okay, everybody, our friends, colleagues, relatives, happy, pleasing, cheerful countenance. So I want to tell you 2 stories and contrast them. So story number 1 is I was traveling once a few years ago, and it was during a time of year that Jewish men have a custom not to shave. Sad time of year. It's the time in between Passover and the next 33 days, during which the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva passed away. So it's a very sad time for the Jewish people, and so we have a custom not to shave. So I had on my face this scruffy, feeble excuse for a beard. And when I'm traveling, I took my ID and I handed it to the TSA agent, for security. And she looks at it, and then she looks up at me, and then she looks at it, and she looks up at me, and she looks at it. I'm thinking to myself, like, what am I on the no-fly list? What in the world's going on? And finally, she looks up and she goes, "I like the beard," because in the picture I'm clean shaven now. I got a beard, okay? And I look at her and I say, "No one has ever told me that before." And I skipped my way to the gate. She made my day. She liked the beard. How about that? Right? Okay. Contrast the following story. We were building out our new office. I work with my parents, both lawyers, and my next 6 siblings, all lawyers, all in the same firm. And I needed some help. So I asked my next 3 younger brothers with whom I work, could you guys help me out? Got to make all these decisions about the fabric and the paint colors and the stain and the door handles and the carpet, whatever. Okay. One brother says, "I'll try to help." One brother says, "I'm colorblind. I can't help." One brother's like, "Dude, come on. I'm not an interior decorator. I can't help you." So I'm sitting in this furniture store making all these decisions about how high do you want the paralegal partitions and what fabric and what color and where do you want the drawers and do you want lights and what type of lights and on which side? And I get an email from my brother, the one who said, "I give you a break. I'm a lawyer. I can't help you out." And the title of the email says, "Carpets." I open the email and it says, "I just went to look at the new office space. I don't like the carpet in my new office. Can I switch to a wood floor?" Okay. Mark Twain once wrote a book of essays. It was called "A Pen Dipped in Hell." Okay. Twain was pretty acerbic back in the day. Okay. So this is when I used to have a BlackBerry. You used to have to press each key with your thumb. So I took both thumbs, I dipped them in hell, and I started to write the response. "You rotten, good for nothing. I always knew you must have been adopted. I asked you for help. You didn't lift a finger. You didn't give me 1 minute of help. And now you have the gall to complain about the carpet after not helping me at all. You blankety blank, 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 blank." Fine. I'm about to press send, and I realize, oh, for crying out loud, tomorrow night is Yom Kippur. I can't send it. I can't send an email like this the night before Yom Kippur. So I erase the entire email, take some deep cleansing breaths, which you should always do before ever sending an email like that, which you really shouldn't send in the first place. And I retype it as follows. "I'm so sorry you don't like the new carpet. I did my best." Okay, I press send, and not 30 seconds later, I get an email back saying, "Just kidding, carpet looks great." Okay, now, had I sent that first email, it would have been a disaster. I would have been in a fight with my younger brother. Like, what is this psychopath? Calls me, tells me I'm adopted, starts cursing me out because I made a joke, okay? On the eve of Yom Kippur, no less, right? So I would have ruined his day, my day, and the next several weeks worth of days for both of us. So I always tell people, it takes the same amount of time, same amount of effort, and it's the same cost to make someone's day or to ruin someone's day. We're supposed to make people's day, savor panim yafos, greet everybody with the pleasing countenance, okay? That's the first do. Second do is that you have to keep your word. Got to keep your word. So there's a very, very interesting insight, and it comes from this week's Torah portion as follows. Jacob, Yaakov, is on his deathbed, and he tells Joseph, his son, who's now the second in command in Egypt, I want you to bury me in Israel. No problem, Dad. Okay, and that's not a simple request. Remember, it's a little embarrassing. Imagine if the president of the U.S. was young enough that his father was still alive and his father died, and the president went and took him to France to bury him there. Like, it's not being buried in the U.S. You're the president's father. It's a little embarrassing. He's like, I want you to bury me, and I want you to swear. Dad, I'll do it. Swear to me. Makes him swear. So Yosef takes an oath, okay? He goes to Pharaoh and says, look, I'd like permission to bury my father back in Israel. And Pharaoh says to him, okay, you can bury him because you took an oath. Very interesting. Seems like if he hadn't taken an oath, he wouldn't have let him. So again, Rashi, greatest of the commentators, says, you know what's going on here? Yosef reminded Pharaoh of something. Pharaoh, remember all those years ago you made me take an oath? I took an oath not to ever reveal that even though you tell the world that you speak every language in the world, you don't speak Hebrew. And I know that because I do. You don't. You made me take an oath. Hey, you don't let me bury my father? You don't let me keep my oath to him? I might break my oath to you. You're not going to like that. Pharaoh's like, oh, grumble. All right, I guess I have to let you do it. Okay. A later commentator says that can't be what Rashi means. It can't be that Yosef was threatening Pharaoh. You got to be out of your mind to threaten Pharaoh. His head would have been rolling in the gutter before he even ended the threat. What he was doing was sharing a deep psychological insight as follows. Pharaoh, years ago, I made an oath to you, and I've kept it all these years. This is many years before. And I've never broken an oath that I've made. I'm worried if you make me break my oath that I took to my father to bury him in Israel, now you've turned me into an oath breaker. And in a moment of carelessness or weakness or forgetfulness, I may break my oath to you. So don't turn me into an oath breaker. Pharaoh says, you know what? You're right. I don't want you to break your oath to him or to me. Go bury him. Very interesting insight. Okay. To update that story, one of my daughters-in-law, her grandfather is no longer with us. When he was around 15, this is going back many, many decades, had a question to ask his father. His younger brother told me this story. He was there when this happened. So he was the eyewitness. So his father comes home. He says, Dad, I have a question. What's the question? He says, well, I took a job as a lifeguard for this coming summer in a camp. And now another camp, it's 3 weeks away from the summer, lost this lifeguard. They offered me an extra like $200 or $300 to be the lifeguard. So I says, what's the question? He says, well, how should I break it to the first camp that I can't be the lifeguard because I got this better offer? His father says, wait 1 second. Did you commit to the first camp? Did you tell them you're going to be a lifeguard? He says, yes, that's why I have to call them and tell them I can't do it anymore. His father says, let me explain something to you. Your word is all that you have. You're going to call the second camp and say, I can't take the offer. I'm very flattered, but I can't take it because I committed to someone else. But that is an extra $200 or $300. Your word is all that you have. And he goes and he calls the second camp and he politely declines. Fast forward decades, I don't know, 30, 40 years later, this same fellow is now a very, very successful owner of multiple properties in New York area. And there's a fellow who's been pestering him for a while to sell a particular building. And one night they're on the phone, he says, come on, sell me that building. I'll give you X millions of dollars. He says, you'll pay that amount? He says, yeah. He says, you got it sold. Tell your lawyers to draw up the contract. It's great. Okay. Hangs up the phone. The guy who's the buyer has a big mouth, mentions to a friend who tells a friend. It's a tight knit real estate, buying and selling community. And somebody else hears about this, quickly calls the seller and says, hey, I heard you were talking to so-and-so about selling him a property. I didn't know that was for sale. He says it wasn't, but he made me a nice offer. So I told him yes. Okay. He says, I will pay you. And I heard what he offered you. I'll pay you another $1 million. Okay. He says, great. Call him and offer it to him. He says, what are you talking about? He says, I sold him the building. He says, what do you mean you sold him the building? I heard you just talked about it over the phone an hour ago. You couldn't have done the papers that quickly. He says, we didn't do the papers. He says, well, then you didn't sell it to him. What do you mean you did it over the phone? That's not a sale. He says, my word is all that I have. I told him that it's sold, so it's sold. That's it. Over. Which means that he got this message. Doesn't matter whether it's $200 or $300 or if it's $1 million. Your word is all that you have, and you have to keep your word. The third do, I could have said it as a don't do. Okay, and it's the following: the Torah says, "Midvar sheker tirchak." You have to distance yourself from a lie. It doesn't say don't lie. Could have said don't lie. For example, I'll read you. Here's the rule. The rules of professional responsibility for lawyers in New York says the following: a lawyer or firm shall not engage in conduct involving dishonesty, fraud, deceit, or misrepresentation. In other words, don't lie. That is a wide receiver toe tap, meaning as long as I can reach over the line, as long as I get my toes inside the line, real close, it's okay. It wasn't a lie. The Torah is saying, no, you can't come close to a lie. You got to distance yourself from a lie. And that creates a problem for me as a lawyer. We're not exactly known for our honesty. I don't know why that is, why we get such a bad rap. But let me share with you a story. I represented a fellow, and he had suffered an injury. And the injury was one that was very difficult to prove. It wasn't a fracture. We could show the x-ray. It didn't require a surgery. It was a head injury. And his doctor said that he suffered a traumatic brain injury. And that's why when he went back to work, they had to reassign him. He couldn't do his typical things that he had to do. And then eventually they fired him. And their doctors on the other side said that he's full of baloney. He's just faking it. He's absolutely faking it. This is very common in that type of case. This is what I do for a living. I'm an attorney. I represent people who get injured in serious accidents. So very wide range of what a jury might do on that case. They might believe his physicians and give him millions of dollars. He's out of work, can't go back to work. He's in his 30s. Or they might believe their doctors, the defendant's doctors, and say, this guy's full of it. We're giving him 50 grand, 100 grand, 200 grand. So before the mediation, I sat down with him and his wife, and I said, look, once we got a firm trial date, we set up a mediation. And at the mediation, you go before a retired judge who tries to bring both sides together, bring down my demand, bring up their offer. And if they meet, the case settles. So before the mediation, I went through with him my recommendation. And my recommendation was that anything under $1.5 million, they should reject. But if it hits $1.5 million, which will put $1 million in his pocket, just about, because my fee is a third, that I think is too much to risk. That you should take. I said, think about it. Let me know what you think. And they came back and they said, we agree. We're not sure if that's the lowest number we'll take. That's up to us. I explained to them that's up to them. Maybe it'll be 1.4 and they'll decide to take it. That's up to them. But if it hits 1.5, we're taking it. Great. So we start the mediation. 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. Do I hear 500,000, 500, 600? If I get 750, 850, 900. Do I hear $1 million? $1 million. We crossed the magic $1 million threshold. We're $1.1 million, $1.2 million, $1.3 million, $1.4 million. And the judge comes back, the retired judge says to me, Harry, got their final offer, $1.5 million. So I go into the room where my clients are, and I explain that we have they just said that they have their final offer, it's $1.5 million. And they, it's a husband and wife, they hug each other, like, we did it, we settled, we've been litigating the case for 3 years or so. I said, we're not settled. They're like, what do you mean? We talked about this. We said 1.5, we're taking it. I said, no, we're not, we're rejecting it because there's more money in that room. This is not my first rodeo. I'm telling you, there's more money in that room. And they said, can they take it away? I said, no, they can't take it away. We're going to reject it. And they said, but they said it's a final offer. I said, the first time I hear a final offer, I hear most recent or current offer. It's not final, okay? So I walk in the room and I say, my clients reject it. Now, that's not really true. They didn't reject it. I say they rejected it. 1.7, 1.8, 1.9, at 2 million, 2.1. I keep going back to the clients. You sure you know what you're doing? So far, so good. 2.2, 2.3, 2.4. At 2.5, they're like, what if they change their minds? They're not going to change their minds. There's more money in that room. At 2.75, the judge asked if I would speak to the defense attorney. He wanted to speak to me alone. I said, sure. So we went into a separate room, and he said to me, Harry, if I can get you 2.9, will it settle the case? I said, nope. But you can get me 3 million, it'll settle the case. I went back, they got 3 million, we settled the case. Now what's going on? I'm supposed to distance myself from lying, and here I am. I'm going in over the course of hours telling lie after lie after lie. And the answer is that I spoke to a rabbi about this many years ago who said that at a mediation, this is perfectly fine. You're not lying, you're bluffing. The same way they'll say to you 5 different times, this is our final offer. This is our really, really final offer. This is definitely our final offer. And then increase it, it's bluffing. So they understand also, okay? Somebody once said to me, so why don't you just say, I can't recommend that number to my client instead of saying my client rejected it. And my answer is that I find that once I tell them I'm the problem, they're fine with the number, I'm the problem, I'm not going to get as much. And my job is to get them as much. So this rabbi said that in this very limited, carefully circumscribed area, I'm allowed because it's bluffing, it's not lying, but I still worry. I worry sometimes. Like I worry about the cost to my soul from doing something that in any other context, I'd have to run from. I'd have to distance myself from. So it's food for thought because typically you cannot bend the truth like that. There are some very, very rare examples where you can. And that's one of them when it's bluffing. So those are the 3 do's. We'll talk about the don't do. So here's where we have an A and a B. So you have to watch what comes out of your mouth. And, Rabbi once said, if only the Jewish people were as careful, if only we were as careful about what came out of our mouth as we are about what goes into our mouth. Often those of us who keep kosher, like, oh, we're looking for the symbol. Is there an OU? Is there an OK? Is it milk and meat? Is it where it come? And then stuff comes out of our mouth. It never, ever should cross our lips. So number 1 is there's a rule that prohibits nivel peh. This isn't so well known. Nivel peh means vulgarity. You're not supposed to curse. You're not supposed to drop F-bombs. Like, really? I didn't know that. That's a law in that. Yeah, it's one of the Torah laws. You're not supposed to curse. Okay. So I had a back and forth once with a lawyer who was a mentor of mine, a spectacularly talented trial lawyer. We were working on a very, very substantial case together. We were trying to bring all the sides together for another round of mediation. And this was our email exchange. I'm going to read it to you word for word. So I wrote to him. This is my colleague. Just spoke to him. He said that Julie promised him she would get back to him today and that the dates are still open. We're talking about scheduling this mediation. He writes back to me the following: who gives a blankety blank 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 about Julie? Okay, now I'm saying blankety blank blank. He said something, far more colorful. I write back to him. I told him that, but not in those exact words. Okay, in other words, I'm telling him, he knows I wear a yarmulke on my head. He knows that I didn't say blankety blank F F F F. I said to him, I got the point across. Okay, he writes back to me the following: you need to curse at your adversaries more. And he now gives me two reasons. It's therapeutic. Also, I find that it makes them think that I am crazy. Okay. So here's a guy who's thoughtfully, artfully cursing. Okay. And did he ever, I lost track of the trail of F-bombs that he dropped during the settlement conferences and the mediations, not in court, of course, but outside court in the private discussions. And I disagree. I respectfully disagree with him. He is a mentor of mine. Most of the time I agree with him when he's giving me work advice or trial advice. But in this one, I disagree because I find that the Torah says I'm not supposed to curse. And I understand that sometimes he wants to make a point and maybe he finds it therapeutic. I find other things that could be equally therapeutic. And if I want to make them think I'm crazy, I got 10 other different ways to make them think I'm crazy. And I find that the English language is expansive and elastic enough that I can get my point across without resorting to four-letter words. So that's one. Second thing we have to be worried about is as follows. So it's very interesting. There's a law in the Torah that prohibits motzi shem ra. Motzi shem ra means spreading falsehoods about someone else. And you will say, that's obvious. Of course it's obvious. That's prohibited in the US. You could sue somebody. If somebody says a falsehood about you and it harms you, you could sue them for defamation, for slander, for libel, all those different things. So that's not a surprise that the Torah prohibits that. You can't make up stories, negative things about someone else. There's one difference. If you sue somebody for defamation, libel, slander, right? Because they said something bad about you, they have one defense to all those claims. That's always a winning defense if they can prove it. It was true. What I said, you're like, but that was the nastiest thing ever. And they say, but you did it. It was true. If they can show that it was true or they had a reasonable basis for believing it was true, they win. That's where a new law in the Torah begins. It's called Lashon Hara. You can't say something negative about someone else, even if it's true. And this is the most common back and forth somebody will have. Somebody will say something terribly negative about someone else. And somebody who knows this law will say, don't say that. It's Lashon Hara. And the person will say, but it's true. And the person who understands the nuances of the law will say, I know it's true. If it wasn't true, that's a whole different prohibition. That's motzi shem ra. That's spreading falsehoods. That's why I said it's Lashon Hara, negative speech. You can't say something negative that's bad, even true, about someone else, okay? So where do you have an exception to this? I'll give you an example. Imagine Rabbi Lewis calls me up and says, Harry, I've been looking, I earned a few dollars somewhere, inherited, won in the lottery, whatever it is, I got a few bucks and I want to invest it. And there's a guy who showed me a deal. And I heard from somebody through the grapevine that you once did a deal with this fellow, okay? And sure enough, I once did a deal with this fellow. And imagine that this fellow is an absolute scoundrel. I know him to be a fraud. Imagine he defrauded me out of money, okay? So I cannot say to myself, oh, I'm so religious. It's Lashon Hara. I can't say anything negative about somebody. In that instance, in my example, I would have not just permission, I would have an obligation to tell Rabbi Lewis to stay away. Now, I might not have the permission to give him all the details. Depends. You'd have to ask a rabbi about that. It's very tricky laws. But certainly I should say to him, run, don't walk away. I can't give you details. Do not do this deal. Harry, is something about the person? I may not be able to give him the details, but do not do this deal. I have to tell him that, okay? Similarly, imagine somebody comes to you, in my world, there is to some degree arranged marriages, but it's not really an arranged marriage, it's arranged dates, meaning that one of my children, when they're ready to start dating, somebody will suggest that person, and then we'll check the families out. It seems, good to go. That the people that know both seems like it's a good match, so we'll introduce them, and then they'll date, and they'll make their own decision. So it's really arranged dates, not arranged marriage, right? So suppose somebody comes to you and says, hey, a woman comes to me and says, Harry, somebody was just recommended to me, and I heard that he was your roommate in yeshiva, right? And I know him well because I was his roommate. And I happen to know this girl, this woman, right? And I know that this fellow, I was his roommate for 2 years. I happen to know, I'm making up a ridiculous example, that he has the smelliest feet on the planet Earth, okay? And I know that he's tried everything and nothing works. And I know that this particular woman, it will drive her to distraction. There's no way this could work. Now, I can't go back and tell her that detail, but I can and should go back and say to her, not for you. Really, you sure? 100% sure. I know him well. Not for you. Okay. Now, note, I just gave you two examples. Second one, obviously a little ridiculous, of where there's an exception. They don't crisscross. So, for example, let's take my first example. Rabbi Lewis comes to me. He wants to do business. The guy he's thinking about doing business with is my old yeshiva roommate. Okay. I cannot say to Rabbi Lewis, listen, the guy is great. He's honest. He's smart. I think it's going to be a great deal. Just one thing. If you're ever in a meeting with him, don't let him take his shoes off. That I can't say. It's got nothing to do with doing business, okay? In the shit-up situation where they might get married, that's relevant, but it's not relevant to the business situation. So you have to be extremely careful in the rare instances where there's an exception, that you carve out only that exception and no more. And what I find is that once you start being sensitive to this, you're just more sensitive in general, okay? For an example, they can always tell people, there are people in my world who are looking and have been looking for quite some time to get married, okay? They haven't yet found their spouse, right? So be mindful. I'm always mindful of that. I'm not going to complain to that person about something that happened with my kid. Oh, my kid was talking back. Because what you're doing is you're complaining about a problem that person would give anything to have that problem. Just be sensitive about it, okay? And so I find that once I'm mindful of that law, I have to be a very big sports fan, and I like watching sports. I like going to games. I have a few very close friends who are huge sports fans. Each one of them only has daughters, and their daughters aren't interested at all. So they've never gone to a game with a son, okay? One of them just had his first grandson. He's very much looking forward to the grandson being old enough so he can go to games with him. So I don't come back from a big game and tell that friend, oh, it was awesome. I went with my boys. We had such a great time. Like, that's just, it's not appropriate. So it makes you more sensitive. Second of the don't do's is that you don't embarrass. We have to be incredibly careful not to embarrass someone. You see, we're going to read these passages next week, that when Moses is at the bush, you can't tell from the passages, but the rabbis explain his whole back and forth with God. God's like, okay, let's go. Time for you to go in. I've heard they're grown. You're going to go in. You're going to take the Jewish people out. Go tell Pharaoh, let my people go. And Moses is like, I don't speak well. God said, well, I'll send Aaron as your spokesperson. They're not going to listen to me. I'll give you signs, okay? Finally, he's like, send whom you'll send. And God gets upset. He says something weird. It seems like they're disconnecting, okay? It's like a non sequitur. He says, Aaron's coming to greet you, and he's happy. So sages explain what's happening is that really the whole week's worth of Moshe trying to push him off was for one reason. He did not want to embarrass his older brother. All these years that Moses was away, when he had to flee as a fugitive, his brother was the leader of the Jewish people, and he doesn't want to dispossess him of that position. So God's got to force him to go. He's like, this is the redemption. It's like, even if it means delaying the redemption, I'm not going to embarrass my older brother. Until God says to him, he's happy, he understands that was his role then, this is your role now. That's how important it is not to embarrass. So Churchill once said, in connection with one of the battles in World War II, that something along the lines of, never before in human events have so few done so much for so many. So I would paraphrase that and say that nowadays, because of technology, never before have so few been able to embarrass someone in front of so many so easily, right? It used to be, if I wanted to embarrass a person in public, not so simple. You got to either get together a big crowd and then get a microphone and embarrass them in front of that crowd. Like, it wasn't so simple. Now it takes me 2 seconds. I pick up my phone and I'm on a group chat on WhatsApp, or I'm on a group chat on a text message, or I'm on a group email where multiple people are copied, and just, that's it. And I just wail on somebody and I can embarrass them in front of a whole lot of people. Now you'll say to me sometimes, I would never do that. Well, unless it was in response, like if somebody started up with me on a WhatsApp chat, then of course I have to give it back to them. No, you don't. No, you don't. Because there's a wonderful feature, for example, on WhatsApp and other types of communication venues and apps, where if you just hold on to the message an extra second, you will get the option reply privately. So when someone says something that upsets you or embarrasses you, click reply. First, calm down. Take those breaths. Do not dip your fingers or your vocal cords in hell, okay? Think about it, judge them favorably, and then reply privately. You said something on the chat. It was deeply hurtful, very insulting. I was very embarrassed. I'd appreciate it if you could, withdraw it. And you'll see that people often, when you reach out that way, are much more amenable to an apology and withdrawing than if you go back in public. Okay. And you'll say, they did it to me in public. Well, here's the problem. Number one, if you now go back in public, you've now embarrassed them in public. So you have the same transgression that they had, A, and B, you've taken revenge, which is a whole nother prohibition. You can't take revenge. And so you reply privately. I have this happen often as follows. I'll settle a case. Okay. And when I settle the case, I'll say to the other side, to the defense attorney, can I just send you a release? And more often than not, especially in more significant cases, the defense attorney said, no, I'll draft a release, right? Why? I think, not to accuse anybody of anything, but they do have a motive. For me, I don't make any more money if I spend more time on a case. I get 1/3 typically of whatever I recover. I recover, $3 million. My fee is $1 million. $300,000. My fee is $100,000. That's my fee. The defense attorney bills by the hour. So the release is one extra thing they can bill. So often again, I'm not saying that's why they do it, but very often they'll say, we'll draft a release. Fine. So what will happen more often than not on the significant cases is I'll get the release not from the partner. The release gets emailed to me from the associate, and the partner, the defense firm, gets copied, right? Because the partner didn't need to draft the release. He assigned it to the associate. Great. Now I open the release, okay? Sometimes looks good, except there's some things we're going to fight over. Wait a minute. What's this confidentiality clause here? I didn't agree. We never agreed to that. We're going to have a back and forth. Like, to make it be something substantive that we have to fight over, I'm going to write back, copy the partner, and have at it. Pick up the phone or write back. Other times, there's an incredibly careless mistake, and I've seen them all in my many years of practice. They spell my client's name wrong, right? Got to fix that. They spell their own client's name wrong. I've seen that. Of course, you have to fix that. They have the wrong settlement amount, okay? I settled the case for $1 million, and they wrote, $900,000. Got to fix that. Or I settled the case for $1 million, and they wrote $2 million. Yeah, okay. I guess I have to fix that. Tempting not to, but I guess I have to fix that, right? When I write back, when it's a stupid mistake, why do I need to copy the partner? Why does the partner have to see that his associate made a boneheaded mistake? Sometimes both names are wrong, because you know what they did? They cut and pasted from a prior release. So they got a totally different case. They got the wrong name of my client, the wrong name of their client, the wrong settlement amount. Really embarrassing. So what I do is, when that situation is, I reply just to the associate. I don't include the partner. And I guarantee you, the first thing the associate does when they open the email and see that they made a really embarrassing mistake is they go back in the email and say, please, I will be copy the partner. And it's like, oh, I can't believe it. I've had associates call me before and say, by the way, I don't know if it was on purpose. I really appreciate, you didn't copy the partner. Why do I need to embarrass them? So sometimes somebody once said to me, well, doesn't the partner need to know that their associate is not so, careful, et cetera? Like, maybe, but that's not, I don't have to be the one to let them know. They were copied. They could have looked at the release. Why? Maybe they were having a bad day. Why do I have to be the one to let them know? And in so doing, embarrass the associate. So just think twice when you are on a WhatsApp chain, on a group email, on a group text. If somebody's going to be embarrassed, okay, and it could be that you have to correct something, but just send it back to that person. Let them correct. Give them the opportunity. Nobody realized that it came from you. The person who made the mistake now an hour later says, oh, sorry, I caught a mistake. Here's the new version, okay? You don't have to send it back that way and embarrass them. So it's something to always be mindful of. And then the last one is the following, is we don't fight unless it is absolutely positively necessary. We're down here to make up with each other when things go wrong. I had a situation recently where two people whom I'm very close got into a terrible, terrible fight. They both called me to tell me about it. I listened to both. Okay, of course, there's right, wrong, get black, white, gray, etc. And it was pretty clear to me that one of them had done something that was inappropriate. So I called the other person after listening to both. And I said to the other person, the one who I felt was wronged, and said, okay, you got to apologize. And that person said, what are you talking about? I was absolutely not wrong here. They were wrong. I said, I agree with you. And she said, then why are you calling me? I said, because I don't think they're going to apologize. I think you will. Wait, that's ridiculous. I said, I know it sounds ridiculous, but I'm telling you, if you can bring it to yourself to apologize, even though you did, I'm agreeing with you. You didn't do anything wrong. If they did, I think that this will disappear. They're never going to do it. You can do it. So she said, let me think about it. The next day I got a text or a WhatsApp message. I just want to thank you. It was not easy. I picked up the phone. I apologized. We made up. It's over. Okay. It's a very big deal, right? In contrast, I'll share you the following story, painful story, not to judge anybody, but to show you what can happen here, is that we have services, afternoon services in my law firm. We're actually on pause now because of COVID. We're hoping to start up again soon. But for years and years and years, every Monday through Thursday, 4 p.m. in our New York office. We also have services in our Hackensack office, in our Philadelphia office, in our Lakewood office. You need services, not so common in a law firm, but we have services. So there was a fellow who had lost his father. So he was leading the service. Very common. If someone is saying Kaddish, they will not only say Kaddish, but they will lead the service. So he came to us. He was a stranger and said, listen, I lost my father. Is anybody else saying Kaddish? No. Do you mind if I say Kaddish and lead the service? No problem. So for 2, 3, 4 months, he is leading the service. Another guy shows up. He says, hi, is anybody saying Kaddish? Yes. He says, oh, well, I lost my father, a week ago. Okay. So that means this guy is in what's called shloshim, which is the first 30 days after the loss of the parent. That gives him priority, meaning that if there's someone else, even if the other person has been saying Kaddish every day, if someone shows up who's within 30 days, he gets to take over and lead the service, okay? So we say to the fellow who has been leading, hey, he's within 30 days, he gets to lead. And the guy who's been leading says, no, I am not giving it up, okay? So the other guy who really has priority says, I don't want to fight. Let him do it, fine. The next day they both show up again. And now guys in the service are getting really angry. They're saying to the guy, fine, what are you doing? The Jewish law says that this guy has priority. He's willing to give it up. Okay, he's willing to give it up, but he shouldn't have to give it up. You should be the one giving it up. And it's getting increasingly hot and heavy, okay? So I say to myself, I'm not really a rabbi. I only, play one on TV once a week when I do my video on the internet. So let me call a rabbi. So I call the rabbi of the closest synagogue to my office in Manhattan. I tell him the story. He says, well, how can I help? I said, I think it's your jurisdiction. He says, what do you mean? I said, you're the closest rabbi. I'm not a rabbi. I'm a lawyer. He says, okay, to his credit. He says, okay, I'll try. He shows up the next day. And the fellow who's not giving it up, he's there. He's getting there earlier and earlier every day to make sure that he's going to have the front of the room so he can lead the service. The rabbi takes him aside and he says, listen, I heard what happened. Mr. Rothenberg explained it to me. I'm sure under Jewish law, somebody within the first 30 days has priorities. Like, Rabbi, I know that. I'm not giving it up. Okay. He says, well, I just want you to hear one other thing from me. Okay. Your father is in heaven now. Your father's in the world to come. And I want you to hear this from me. I'm telling you, he would not want you to fight. He would want you to give it up. It's a bigger honor for him. Okay. And I'll never forget this. The guy looks back at the rabbi and he goes, Rabbi, you didn't know my dad. He'd want me to fight. And I'm looking at this going like, you got to be kidding me. Okay. This guy thinks that his father up in heaven is like, you go get him. Okay. It doesn't work that way. It would have been a bigger honor for his father to say, look, Dad, you know how much I want to lead, but the law says that I'm supposed to give it up. That's what he should have done. But sometimes people just, we get so invested, our honor or somebody else's honor, that we fight and we shouldn't. So to summarize, and this, by the way, is not an exhaustive list. This is a curated list of 6 or, including the A and the B, 7 different laws out of many, 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 many laws of interpersonal behavior. And they're every bit as important. I don't mean to take away from the Sabbath, incredibly important. I don't mean to take away from the kosher laws, incredibly important. But these laws are 1/2 of the Torah. The rituals are between you and God, Moses number 1, but the interpersonal ones between you and someone else, Aaron number 1, as Rashi says, they're equal. They're equally important. So they're things to think about. So the ones we talked about are, just to review, the Jews were sever panim yafos. You have to greet everyone with a pleasing countenance, same effort, same amount of time, same investment. You can make someone's day or ruin someone's day with that same little bit of effort. Number 2, you got to keep your word, because your word is all that you have, whether it's $200 or $1 million or some multiple of that. You have to tell the truth. You have to not only tell the truth, you have to distance yourself. Don't even come close to falsehood. There may be certain very, very narrowly circumscribed areas. We have to be careful not to take that and use that as license to go into other areas. Don't do is where you have to watch what comes out of your mouth. Stop dropping F-bombs to the extent you can. You should not be uttering profanities. You can't say something negative about someone else that's false. That's obvious. And you also can't say something negative about someone else if it's true. Again, only within very, very narrowly circumscribed areas. And even then, when it's allowed, you could only say the least possible. Like, don't do business with that person. You don't necessarily have to give them all the details. Don't embarrass someone. We have to be super careful when we're using, our phones and computers, and don't fight unless it's absolutely necessary. And hopefully, it won't be necessary. I think I am out of time. I don't know what your schedule is. I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes if anybody has questions. And otherwise, nice to see you all. And thanks for listening.